As I'm pretty sure most of you are aware by now, Jay Slater's case has taken the world by storm. A lot of people will ask, what is it that makes a case like this so high profile? Usually in these types of cases, the individual in question is young, there's a mysterious or conspiratory element around the case, and news surrounding the case leaks out to the public over time. This in itself creates a kind of murder mystery, and dependent on the angle in which you've entered the case, is also dependent on the angle in the theory of which you believe the outcome of this is. But in Jay Slater's case, this one ticks all the boxes. So what I wanted to do in this video, and feel free to jump in the comment section down below by letting me know some of your thoughts, and we together can try and figure out what the most likely outcome to this case could be. So Jay Slater is a 19-year-old individual that went missing on the 17th of June. Some of the facts that we do have is that on the 16th of June, Jay Slater attended the NRG Music Festival. Now what's weird and gives a huge gap in this investigation is for some unknown reason at that festival, Jay becomes separated from his friends. And this is where the first mystery sort of intertwines itself, because Jay then meets two individuals. Now I wouldn't see too much conspiracy into this if these two individuals were roughly around the same age as Jay. One of the individuals that Jay Slater met is currently unnamed and is roughly in his 40s, and the other individual that has been named is Ayab Kasim, who is roughly around 31 years of age. Now one of the first things that popped into my mind regarding this is, why is a 19-year-old individual at a festival of interest to a 31-year-old man and 40-year-old man who don't actually know him? Secondly, how is it if Jay became separated from his friends that he met these individuals? If it's been sort of noted so far that these random individuals also know the friends of Jay, and so he becomes separated from his friends but randomly bumps into two individuals who just so happen to know of his friends, even though the comparison between age range in these individuals is quite strange in itself, and only then boosts more questions into how that group is formed when they seem to know each other. But regardless to this, Jay meets these two individuals at the festival, and rather than travelling back to his accommodation, Jay Slater decides to get into a car with these two individuals and then travel roughly around 30 minutes into mountainous terrain away from where his accommodation is. Now it's completely unknown as to why he did this, and realistically thinking about it, if Jay's accommodation was 50 minutes to an hour away in a car from his last known location from the accommodation with these two individuals, it would have actually been quicker to have dropped Jay at his accommodation from the NRG festival as opposed to taking him all the way back to some random location. But regardless to this, we know that Jay's at that accommodation, and this comes from two Snapchats taken. One of these Snapchats is taken at roughly around 7:30 AM, and it shows Jay having a cigarette on the doorstep of this accommodation. Jay was meant to have seen one of the neighbours to this accommodation, where he would ask them when the bus is and where the bus is, and they would tell him where it was, as well as the fact that the bus came every 10 minutes, which is weird in itself because, as we know, that bus wasn't coming for another 2 hours. Regardless to this is where another really interesting question comes into play. Jay Slater decides for whatever reason that he needs to get a bus out of there. Even though this individual was driven to that location, it's unknown why he didn't ask these two individuals if he could simply get a lift back near to his accommodation or just to his accommodation. Regardless to this though, Jay decides to go and take the bus, which really isn't far from the accommodation in which he's at. And Jay arrives at this bus stop sometime after 8 AM. And again, this is known because a witness has seen Jay Slater at that bus stop. And this is when Jay Slater would ask her when the next bus would be, and she would tell him that the next bus would arrive at roughly 10 AM. Now at this point, it's only roughly a 2-hour to an hour and a half wait for Jay Slater to wait for the bus to get him back to his accommodation. Not only that, he's just come out of an accommodation 5 minutes away from that bus stop. So if he learns the information in which that the bus is coming in the next 2 hours, why doesn't Jay Slater just simply wait for the bus? There is a cafe right next to that bus stop, and he could have simply have just gone in there, could have tried to have sobered up, had a coffee, some food, a tea, some water, but when learning that that bus is going to arrive at 10 AM and this would cost him a 2-hour wait, instead of just waiting, Jay Slater decides to then take a walk. And this isn't back to his accommodation, because Jay Slater is seen again by the first witness who told him the bus was going to be arriving at 10 AM, about 25 minutes later, walking in the wrong direction from where he needed to be going. And at this point, from what is known, is that Jay Slater then rang one of his friends, and this friend in question is Lucy Law. Jay Slater had apparently rung her around the time of 8:30 AM, in which Jay would tell her that he had 1% battery left on his phone, was completely lost, dehydrated, and the walk back to his accommodation was roughly 11 to 14 hours. Rightly so, the individual Lucy told him to go back to the accommodation in which he'd just come from. But what's really interesting here that we're not being told by these individuals is why Jay didn't decide to go back to that accommodation. Somebody must know more regarding that, because immediately you would ask your friend, why are you not going back to the accommodation? What's happened? Stay where you are, we'll try and get ourselves out to you. Secondly, Jay's not on any type of main road, because about 11 to 12 days later, another one of Jay Slater's friends had come forward, giving out his statement to the public, in which he said that his friend was on FaceTime to him, in which he could see that he'd cut his leg on a cactus, was in rough gravelly terrain, and that he completely veered off track from where he was meant to be. Not only this, but Jay Slater also sent a pinpoint of his location to these individuals, in which indicated to them just how far Jay Slater actually was from them at that point. But again, what is weird here is why they're not explaining what led to Jay Slater being completely off track. But then we go back to the start of this and you have to ask yourself, who in their right mind decides that with 1% battery, they're going to type in their accommodation and find out that roughly this is an 11 to 14 hour walk back to your accommodation, and would immediately decide not to go back to where they've just come from and ask if they could merely charge their phone while they await for the bus, was dehydrated, was walking away from the location in which their maps were showing them, in an area of which is mountainous terrain in Tenerife where they claim to be completely lost. And there is kind of an answer to this, or an assumption to this, in the fact that you would do this if you need to get away from the place that you have just come from, or you are worried about individuals that are about to arrive at the place that you've just come from and you are not comfortable enough being there, or the individuals that you've just met are individuals that don't make you feel comfortable enough being around them, and for whatever reason you've had to decide to take yourself off road and completely off track and away from the route of which your accommodation is, which again only suggests that if he's walking away from his own accommodation, he doesn't want two individuals that he's just been with to get into a car and follow the route in which his accommodation is going towards to potentially catch up with him. So the first problematic situation you have here is the last two individuals that were with him and the last individuals that spoke to him on the phone. As the first question is, what is the reasoning of why he can't go back to the accommodation or wait in the area in which the bus is going to arrive to take him back to his accommodation, when all of these things are completely against him? Now, to add more mystery to this, when Lucy Law made her first appeal on the internet, what was really strange about it was throughout the whole interview they only showed the back of Lucy Law's head. And this is one of the things that you need to take into account here. If your friend has gone missing, for example, when you're trying to appeal to the public, you need to put emotional input into the fact that you are trying to reach out to the public to get their attention in order to help with the case. You're trying to emotionally show and explain to the public the reasoning in why you're distraught or distressed about the situation that is at hand. But we only got the back of Lucy Law's head. And that, when you're making a public appeal, is really strange in itself, as the first question becomes, what is it that you're trying to necessarily hide? This come down to personal opinion and the fact that I might personally be out there front and center, but this also gives credence to a weird little theory. This individual in question has been tied to multiple little conspiracy theories, and although she might not be directly involved in this case or have any involvement whatsoever in the case, I'm not suggesting that she does, if she has any involvement in some other things elsewhere, that might be one of the reasons in why she hasn't shown her face. It's because with there being so many conspiracies already out there, if there are individuals that know of her or have, for example, met her before through certain things, being out in Tenerife, even though she's not directly involved in this case, she could have been directly involved in certain things that make her look suspicious and have an involvement in this case. And that could be one of the reasons in itself as to why she never put herself forward in front of the camera. Because in this day and age of social media, what, did she think that with her name fully out there, with social media profiles, Facebook, did they think that they were going to be able to stay hidden? Because that clearly wasn't going to be something that was going to happen. Now, I'm not throwing any accusation on that individual, it's just interesting food for thought. Next, a lot of people have spoken about another individual's interview. What's suspicious about this is that he came out like 11 to 12 days later. Now, a lot of people have spoken about body language. Now, I'm not an expert in body language myself. I know a few little bits and pieces, but the general public's idea of what body language is actually quite backwards in itself. So a lot of people said that the individual in this interview didn't make a lot of eye contact and that he constantly looked away. That's actually not unusual, believe it or not. Sometimes when people are having to recollect from memory, they actually generally look away. Usually it's in the direction of the left, and this is normally when the brain is going into a place to find the memory to go back to then try and give out the best representation as to what it remembers. As well as the fact that this individual was 19 years of age, he could have had a multitude of different things to say in this interview. He does say a lot of the time that he's been completely blank during this, and that can give reasoning into his emotionless kind of expression, as one of the things that we do see more than the other emotions expressed is the fact that he smirks and gives off a few laughs in talking about his friend, when for me there would be a lot more concern and worry in talking about my friend. I would be emotionally explaining what it was that I was going through, even if explaining that I was completely blank. blank. I would then explain that I was sorry, it's just that I didn't know how to emotionally put myself across right now, but I need the help of the public in order to help find Jay. One of the things that's weird about this is in both interviews, we don't learn anything new. We don't learn anything that helps us with the case. What we did have was 2 interviews from 2 individuals who didn't really know at that point how to necessarily express themselves regarding the issue in what they're going through. You have to remember that a lot of people will say, this is how I'd act when going through this situation. This is a really rare situation to actually go through. Dependent on this angle, to them there could be a possible scenario in which their friend has simply just gone missing and they are wrapped up and involved in the middle of it with no idea as to what to do, with no help from the public necessarily, unless it's talking about conspiracies or theories regarding the case. Recently I've seen a lot of YouTubers leak text regarding these individuals. Now when it comes to authorities, I think people need to understand that police don't necessarily need to have your phone in order to access it. All they need is the cellular number or the mobile phone number and the cellular provider in which that phone goes to. With these 2 bits of information, police can go to that cellular provider and, for example, could find text messages that you've deleted for the past 5 years held on a server. So before these texts reached the internet and YouTube, I'm pretty sure that investigators somewhere along the lines would have been able to have intercepted or had more knowledge about this than the public or these individuals were aware of, which could have by now brought these individuals, or we would have seen these individuals brought in for interrogation, in which tactics would have been used against them without their knowledge, because the individuals questioning these witnesses would have had more proposed knowledge than these witnesses would have currently have known. Thus would have been able to have made these witnesses slip their stories up, which would have then lengthened the depth in which this investigation could have taken. Problematically though, with Spanish authorities, they need an abundance of evidence to be able to actually go into a case and do anything with it in the first place. Hearsay just isn't enough for them to be able to go out and use certain resources when the resources themselves aren't readily available because of the infrastructure and how tax works out there, without getting too political into it. But you're looking at a country in itself that needs tourism in order to survive, which now in itself creates a problem, because if they don't get tourism, where people are now scared to go out there through to conspiracy theories and the fact that a young 19-year-old teen has just completely gone missing off the face of the earth, as well as the fact that that's also highlighted other people that have mysteriously just gone missing around that area, with the fact that there are ties to massive criminal organisations out there. So if it does turn up that Jay's missing through a criminal organisation, this becomes problematic for tourism, which becomes problematic for the resources in which Spain then needs to intake, and thus just creates a revolving door. As without tourism, they can't have resources, and without resources, they can't have tourism. So we know Spanish authorities are quite up against it. Not only that, but we also know that they called off their investigation quite early into the case. To them, it seemed quite simple. Couldn't find Jay, stop looking. When that then becomes problematic in itself, because now we get into more questions that have become unanswered. And that is, who are the 2 last known individuals that were with Jay Slater? Now, I'm unsure about this, but it's meant to have been that one of the individuals that was Jay Slater's friends tracked down these 2 individuals. She was meant to have gone through videos and Facebook photos and was somehow able to track the location of where these 2 individuals were staying. This could have been from where Jay had pinpointed the location in which he was last known to be at. I don't know if that was directly from the accommodation in which he was staying at. I'm assuming this would have been from the location in which he was lost at. So if she had then gone around the area and knocked on doors, she could have potentially have found these 2 individuals. But Lucy Law is meant to have been the individual that found these 2 people that were the last known people to have been with Jay. And she's the one that then handed them over to Spanish authorities, which does make it a bit confusing if she has any involvement, as thus she would only be then involving herself if it was known to her that these individuals had some kind of connection to Jay's disappearance. But Spanish authorities went and then questioned these 2 individuals and literally let them go after nothing more than just simple questioning. Now, I myself have watched a few crime documentaries. I've also helped out in a couple of really high profile cases, but usually the last known individuals to have been seen with a person or persons that goes missing or is then later on found murdered are usually the individuals that are the ones that have either done it or know something that's relevant about the case as to why this individual has disappeared or why they've been murdered. And what's really strange about this is Spanish authorities almost immediately let these 2 individuals go and stated to the public that these 2 individuals were of no relevance to the case. How? How so? As an investigator, I would have sat down and asked these 2 individuals, was there any reasoning in which Jay didn't just come back to the apartment and wait with you guys? Is there anything that might have made Jay fear for his life if he came back to this accommodation? Was there any fallout between you two during the night or during the event that would have made Jay feel somewhat uncomfortable? It would have merely have been honing in about the fact that Jay didn't seem to want to go back to that accommodation after leaving there. That would have been one of the first things or signs to me that would have been abundantly clear in sticking out, because he not only doesn't walk back to his accommodation, because he literally can't, unless he's traversed in like hiking, he walks in the opposite direction, and then when he goes missing, weirdly enough, nobody else sees Jay. Jay's spotted by like 3 individuals in that town before 8:30 a.m. He's seen by one of the neighbours at the accommodation he stayed at. He's then seen by a witness at the bus stop, and he's then seen again by that same witness but going in the wrong direction 25 minutes later, before he's never spotted again. Now, the area in which Jay has even traversed through, they conveniently said you'd need a machete to get through. What makes an individual take that route when they don't know where they are? Now, I'm not trying to add just like major assumption to this. You don't irrelevantly just do that. You're either hiding, getting away from the accommodation or the people that you've just been with, or you're uncomfortable about a situation that's about to go down. Either or, that in itself doesn't make sense. Then adding to the fact that 2 individuals that he was last known to be with aren't even released under investigation, but they're released because Spanish authorities say they're no relevance to the case, when they're roughly with this individual only 45 minutes to an hour prior to him going missing. And then to add insult to injury, these last 2 people to have been with Jay seem to also have a really interesting past. But in and of itself, so does the individual that disappeared, Jay Slater. And is that in and of itself one of the reasons in which these individuals know of each other? But that is what we're going to be getting into in part 2, as I'm going to go into a part 2 regarding the last 2 known people to have been with Jay Slater before his disappearance, as well as what the family's thoughts are regarding this case, what Spanish authorities are up to, and as well what a private investigator that's flown out there has to say about this case, which is super interesting. As when Jay first went missing, a couple of theories hit the internet, and one was really easy to debunk. But there was another theory, and now a private investigator has gone out there. It seems that that theory has come full circle. So be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to hit that bell and turn on post notifications so you can see anything that I'm uploading regarding this case. As well, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section down below with some of your ideas regarding the missing teen's disappearance. Anyway, that's it from me. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.